All right. Well, good afternoon, Facebook Live. We normally meet on Fridays, but today I decided to just take a moment in time, and just come to you live in the middle of the week. And I wanted to introduce you guys to somebody very, very, very special to me. It's Miss Patrice Cunningham, Washington. Patrice, say hello.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Good, you guys. So I wanted to take a moment and introduce her to many of you. Some of you probably already know her, but in this forum, this is a new face to our community. And so I just wanted to introduce you. First of all, Patrice is an award-winning author and a transformational speaker. You guys have heard her on several different platforms. What I know best about her is that she's restoring hope amongst women. In the sense that women who have been chasing money instead of chasing purpose, she is just out there in the fields, in the trenches, helping people to redefine wealth. Wealth being well-being, having a well-balanced life. And so today I decided to invite her on, as she used to be known as the Money Maven, America's Money Maven, but now she's kind of revamping that. She's been spending a few years kind of changing that image and rebranding some things. And I really just am so excited about what she's doing with redefining wealth and the Earn More Money movement, which I was actually a part of about 2 years ago. I took the course. I even have the file right here on my desk to prove it. So thank you, Patrice, for joining me today. And we're so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. But you didn't say the best part.
Oh, who I am, right?
Well, the fact that you're my real friend in real
life. That's right. That's right. I won't say besties, but we are becoming besties. We spend a lot of time together as prayer partners, which I feel is such a blessing to have. Someone who's real, invested, someone who links arms with me on the prayer battlefield to really work out life's challenges, and lay it on the table before God and really kind of attack that thing, not just in what we can do, but in our prayer lives. So it's a real thing. Who you see on Facebook, who you see online, that's Patrice. Every day, 100% consistent. And so I'm so happy to, I think there's so many ways in which we're connected. Our husbands were good friends and frat brothers from college, and they grew up together, and now our kids are like the third generation in. So it's been fun. It's been fun. So I didn't introduce myself. I didn't say my name is Alexis Roberts, or Julian Alexis, you guys are now knowing, the founder of Campaign P31. I'm so excited to talk about her. I didn't talk about me, but that's in typical Alexis fashion. So today we are coming to you with a new series that God has kind of like downloaded to me. And I feel like this is like the second trimester of pregnancy, where you're just kind of like starting to stretch out and you're starting to grow and starting to see what has been going on inside for a while now. Mm-hmm. And that's through this new series called Hear, Know, and Follow. So what I wanted to do is, you guys always hear me talking about what it means to hear the voice of God and what it means to kind of like know that something in your spirit is not quite settled and moving on that. And so now I want to kind of take a few of my friends, Patrice being one of them, and kickstart this thing right by just kind of asking them some questions that you've heard about, things that you've heard me talk about for a while now. I want to get a new perspective, a refresher. I thought that maybe if you hear it from them, that you'd understand if you have those moments in your own lives. Mm-hmm. So we're going to kickstart with a few questions now that we've got the introductions all out of the way. I am referencing this whole concept, the hear, the know, and the follow, with the scripture that is found in John 10:27, where it says, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me." Okay? Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, Patrice, mm-hmm. we've all had those moments where what does hearing God's voice really feel like? What does it look like? And what does it sound like to you?
Wow, that's an excellent question. So I think it's been different things at different points in my life, because if you're like me, sometimes you might feel what you think is a nudge from God, but then you still don't act. And so then it has to come to you a different way. Some of us are just more hard-headed than others. And so at different points in my life, I have felt, I call it that still small voice, where, and it's really not a male's voice. It's not another voice. It's kind of my voice in my head, and it doesn't seem like it's in my head though. It feels like someone is talking to me, but it's my head, like thinking through different things. I don't know how else to say it.
Or thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like certain thoughts. But the way that I know most often that is not God, that it's not me and it is God, is because they're not thoughts that I would have had on my own. Like, I didn't necessarily have a frame of reference to have such wisdom at that time, or to have that. I'm talking uncommon thoughts where it doesn't even make sense for where I am, where I grew up, who raised me, the environment I'm in, and it totally will just shift my thinking and put me down a path that I just was not even aware of. And so that's usually when I know, like, okay, this had to be the voice of God. That's what I call it. Because I'm like, I wouldn't have chose this by myself, especially things that are hard or things that seem to be more work. Like you talked about me rebranding and shifting from Real Money Answers to Redefining Wealth. That was God for me. Like, that was a voice that was like, didn't I tell you when you were on the floor bawling and snotting and crying after you lost all of your money and most of your earthly possessions, and you cried out to me, I told you what to do. And now here you are several years later, you've rebuilt your life, you've rebuilt your career, and you've gotten comfortable with these little sound bites and little snippets of information that you're out here giving on the news or on talk shows or on radio and all this stuff. But that's not what I told you. Now, for me, like, logically, why mess up a good thing? I'm making good money. I'm well respected in my field. I'm doing my thing. It would not occur to me to halt everything, to take my site down, to stop selling all the products I have, to redo and launch all of this stuff that has been working. And so when that came to me, it was just like this voice, but it was like a nudge. And then it became like this tug and this pulling where I could not let it go. Right? Like, I thought about it and I was like, oh, that sounds like work. I don't think you're talking to me. I'm comfortable doing the work that I'm doing. And I wanted to go down the path that I was on, and I kept coming back to it. And then, so it usually for me starts that way. And then it's confirmed by random conversations. So a lot of times I think that God's voice comes through other people. I have had many a times where I have met a random person in Subway, an Uber driver, a woman in a gift shop, and they speak to me directly where I am. I mean, tell me things or create a conversation based on things that I've only thought to myself. I haven't, and I've prayed about, but I haven't expressed, not even to my husband or to some of my closest friends. And someone that I don't know will be like, hey, have you ever thought of, and you're like, what?
Just come from with that.
And so for me, I also see that as the voice of God. I think that a lot of times when we're hard-headed, and maybe it doesn't take that, I'm just saying, but I think sometimes when I'm being hard-headed, God is like, okay, so you're not recognizing the me in you because you're not listening to that voice anymore. So let me send an audible voice so you see that I'm not playing with you and that I need you to move. So for me, those are the two ways. And so sometimes it also just manifests too in opening up a devotional and it's speaking directly to where I am, like today in that moment, or opening up the Bible like I did when I was on that floor, bawling and snotting and crying and saying, God, why me? And ending up on Proverbs 17:16. And I don't say this, I don't say it to be like cute. I literally opened up the Bible and that's where I was on Proverbs. I scanned for maybe 1.2 seconds and I was on Proverbs 17:16. which is something that I know I probably read before because I loved reading Proverbs, but it spoke to me in that moment like probably nothing else could. And that has been the foundation for my entire life, my work, my life, how I live my life for the last 10 years. So, you know, I think for me, those are the ways that I kind of hear God. And it just manifests in a lot of different ways where I just know, I know it's nothing but God. Because sometimes I turn down a street and there's a message on a billboard and I'm like,
okay, all right, I hear you.
And you know, when it's like, when you're used to being on automatic and you take the same path all the time and then all of a sudden you veer off that path, like it's a route you never take. And all of a sudden you're like, you know what, let me turn down this random street. And then you get down the street and you see something, you witness something, you read something, and you're like, okay, that was God directing my path.
Yeah.
So that he could get the message to me, because maybe I missed it. And we don't know sometimes when we miss it, you know, we don't know that it went over our heads.
Yeah, oftentimes I say the same thing. Like, I always miss the first pebble. You know, it's the little pebble and it kind of ricochets off your head and you're like, it's not that big of a deal. And then there's a larger rock that comes. And you're like, well, that seems kind of weird. I just had that thought not too long ago. Okay. You know, and then you still, like, if you're like me, totally oblivious, don't think about anything that's coming around, or, you know, just not paying attention. And then next, you know, like you see the brick is flying towards your head and you're like, whoa, okay, that's it. That's that same message, 3 different ways, 3 different times. The third one is always the one that's, you know, the one to shake you at your core. And for me, I've always needed 3 confirmations. And so I think my prayer has been reaction time, right? To respond. Yeah, to respond faster. And so my next question is more like, have you ever gotten it wrong? Where you thought you heard, you thought you received confirmation, and in fact, it turned out to not be what you thought it was, which is not his voice.
Ooh, that's a great question. You know what? I'm not even sure. I can't even say that, because there have been times when I look back on things and I'm like, seriously? Like, is that how it really went down? You know, like, really, is that how it really went down? And my mind is blown. But in the same respect, I've also learned to believe that everything is either a lesson or a blessing. And so even when things don't go my way and they're not the way I prayed for them to go, or how I prayed that it would turn out, I still learned so much in the process that I feel like the only way God could have shown me the lesson was through that.
Right.
You know, and there's a possibility he could show me different lessons a million different ways. You know, I'm like everyone else. Some days I'm like, God, it has to be all bad. Like, you could have taught us this a different way, you know? But even when things, when I trusted someone who I shouldn't have trusted, and I went against the still small voice that told me, watch him, and I didn't watch as closely as I should have, or a business transaction where I knew, you know, it's like a part of me knew that, and then I was doing that. Well, let me give them the benefit of the doubt, as we do, right? So we're trying to use logic over using that like internal GPS that God gives us, over using intuition. And I've done that. But in the same respect, because I coach people now, because I use my podcast as a platform, all of those things have helped me also be able to help other people navigate through difficult life, you know, circumstances, or, you know, and not just with finances, but a number of things, you know, that I've dealt with. And so I don't know. It's like, man, I really believe that even when we miss it, that's where God's grace kicks in. Ooh, and he can navigate. You know what I'm saying? Like, he can still navigate and use that thing, because all things come together for our good. So as much as
make a message from it.
Yeah. And it's like, as much as maybe I should have gotten it the first time, or maybe I waited too long and I had the brick fly past, You know, there are some times where I've had a pebble and I moved and I was on it and I saw God's, you know, blessings all over something. And then there were times where I moved or I didn't move as quickly as I should have. And it didn't quite turn out the way that I would have liked, but I still got something from it. So to me, nothing is in vain, you know, nothing was lost on it. I just learned a better lesson.
That's good. So over the years, we've talked about sitting at my kitchen table. We've talked about what it means to have or to go through what we call God moves.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to kind of like unpack what that would mean to have made decisions on what you call a God move.
Oh my gosh. So much of what I've been up to, I think for the last 10 years have been God moves. And I call them God winks, you know? So first is the God move, which is kind of like do this or don't do this, or go here, don't go here, or engage this person or don't engage this person. And in the moment, they didn't make sense, right? And so that's when you're like praying, like, God, are you sure? Is that what you said? Because it didn't make sense. For example, after my husband and I lost everything and we had the 7-figure business and we were at the point of scraping up change. And when we got to Atlanta, after living on my brother's couch for 3 months and then just barely getting into an apartment, I got a job offer. Okay. And I was driving down, if you're from Atlanta, Roswell Road, driving down Roswell Road, headed to take this job offer. That was significant, you know, especially when you're coming from nothing for the last year or so. And I was maybe 5 minutes out from getting to the office building, and I get a phone call from an organization where I had been volunteering, doing like financial education stuff. And they said, like, hey, do you have a real job? Like, you're the star volunteer, right? Like, but do you have a real job? Like, are you available to do more? And I'm like, well, you know, I was actually getting ready to take a full-time position, but that's my love. Like, financial education is where I really feel called to. I said, but you know, I'm heading in to like do like shake on it and do new hire paperwork. Like, it was that confirmed. And they were like, well, okay, it would be a shame to miss this opportunity for us to miss having you, because this job description that we're creating sounds just like you. And like, it would be something that would be perfect for you, but it's not going to be available for another 3 months or so. And, you know, I was like, oh, okay. Well, and the first part of me was like, your family needs the money. Y'all been struggling. You sleeping on an air mattress. You don't have a bed yet. Like, you got to take the money. And that voice was talking to me back and forth in my head. And it was just like, do you trust? Do you trust? Do you trust? And I wanted to argue, like, what you mean, do I trust? Like, but I was just, you know, you're kind of having this internal conflict. And then I walk into the office space, and it was actually one of my previous mentors, and walking to the office space, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and they're telling me all this stuff and what my job description would be and the types of things I would do. And none of those sound anything like what I felt God called me to do. Okay. And so I was sitting there listening. And they were like, does this sound good? And I was like, actually, and the words left my mouth before I could even like snatch them back.
What did you say?
I said, actually, I don't think this is going to be a good fit for me. And they were like, you broke, right? They knew the whole, you're broke. I was like, yeah, but I really want to do something around financial education of all things. So a woman who has lost all her money is up here talking about, no, I feel led to teach and share people about money. And that God move was like, no, you're not going to settle to get a check right now when I have something far greater for you. Wow. And as much as we needed it, and it was like this, in that moment, I just could not accept it. It was a God move. And the God wink that I had not totally lost my plumb mind came in when every other week or so, just different things were coming up. And there were opportunities for me to make money in that space. Not what I would have made with that salary, but it was a little something. It was like someone invited me to go speak someplace and it was like $150. Well, at that time I had never really been paid to speak. So it was like, I got you. Somebody gonna pay you 150, they're gonna pay you 15,000, you know? And so that was a wink. And then like something else happened. It was a wink. And then someone responded to something on my blog. And then I started to write for other people. And so it went from me just having a blog that nobody read, but me and my mama occasionally. She occasionally read. She wasn't committed.
Come on. Come on.
It turned into writing for other big websites, huge websites, which turned into writing for magazines. And it turned into, doing radio interviews. And that turned into a weekly segment on a national radio show, which has now led to this podcast that I have that's like really growing. And so those have been winks, the things that just say, you're on the right track. Keep going. You're on the right track. Keep going. And so I look for God winks. And whenever I don't experience some kind of wink in what I'm doing, then I usually lean towards believing that maybe it's time to really, really, pray more or, fast or do some other things so I can be clear.
Dig a little deeper.
Yeah, because I don't want to quit at the first sign of something not going my way, but I also don't want to be successful on a path that God did not create for me.
Right. That's actually you toiling, working harder than you should to get this end result, that takes you off of towards your purpose. Yeah, I get it. Because he didn't mean for you to toil. It should come easy. He said your gift would make room for you.
Right. And that's why I believe so much in attracting things, right? Yeah. Like I always talk about with redefining wealth. One of the things that I really talk about is setting big goals, but adding the words grace and ease to the end. Like, God, yes, like I believe this is what you're putting on my heart. I believe this is the desire that you've given me, but I want it with grace and ease. Right. I don't want it with more stress, more strife, more struggle. I'm not opposed to sacrifice and I'm not opposed to hard work, but bless my efforts. Like, let me see the fruits of my efforts. I don't want to be out here toiling for 25 years, talking about I'm working on my first book and it still never manifest. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I hear that all the time. And then I also work with people who are just really successful and really unfulfilled. And I don't know, I feel that fulfillment comes from working and living in your purpose, and trusting that GPS that God gives you to kind of guide you on the path that he has for you, not the one you keep trying to force.
Yeah, I think that the idea of trust is so key. Yeah. It's huge. I think one of the major challenges is that once you hear the voice is being able to trust God for the unseen things, not knowing what the destination will be. And for me, in my own personal experience, I remember so clearly 2 years ago when I was at my job and I was moving up the ranks as a teacher, had been in education for 14 years, had won awards and teacher of the year and this, that, and the other. And it was all great. And I was on a path to becoming an administrator, which is kind of like the path for a teacher, right? And all those things were great. All my peers around me were all going up the same ladder. And at a certain point, it just felt so hard. I felt like I was a square peg trying to be squeezed into a round hole. And it became more burdensome, more draining. It really just stole my joy. And I just hated going to work. And I remember Sunday coming and just crying Sunday evening. And I would hide it by watching a popular TV show where, it was super emotional. Like if people were so happy, they ended up crying because of this TV show. And I would just hide my tears every Sunday at 7:30 while watching the show because I dreaded the fact that I had to go to work at this, being a teacher. It had nothing to do with the location or anything like that, but just being a teacher because that's not what God was working on in the inside. And so he had to make me feel that discomfort long enough as one of the rocks to then be able to trust the unseen. Like, I've tried it this way and I know this path.
Yeah.
Let's try this side. And I was willing because I had given my all in that area. And so, what would you say? How big is it for you? And the unseen is really where you would apply your faith. What would you say about the issue of trust and how it pans out for you in your life and your walk?
Well, I want to say something before that too, because I think it's really important that we understand that even in that season, that 14 years and that path up to you becoming a teacher, you were hearing God and you were getting God winks, and that was still the foundation that he needed for you to be who you are. And I think it's important for us to look at those as seasons and know that purpose can be seasonal. Mm-hmm. And so it's okay when we have to shift and when we hear something new. I think a lot of us don't trust what's next or what's unseen if it looks too unfamiliar from where we've been or what we've done before. Right? It's like, well, no, because I've been doing this. I remember someone prophesying to me that I would have a media empire years ago. Like, and I was like, and they talked to me about books and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm a numbers girl. I do numbers. I don't know where she got that from. I never would have seen books and speaking and all this stuff. I spoke to promote my real estate and mortgage business, but I wouldn't have seen myself as a transformational speaker or a radio person and all these things. I mean, when you look at the fact that I was on the Steve Harvey Morning Show for 4 years on a weekly segment, when I met them at 19 years old, I was an intern. I had no business being an intern in radio because I was a business major, not broadcast journalism or marketing or anything. And that was a God wink. That was like a God move. I just moved on something that I heard on the radio. And now here you go, fast forward and look at the relationship and how my business has blossomed because of the opportunities I had from there 15 years before, you know? And so the trust for me comes in even when it's unfamiliar territory and I'm like, I don't really get it. Like, I don't get how I'm supposed to navigate or move to that. One of the things that helps me really lean into my trust is thinking about all the other times I didn't get it and what came out of it, or all the other times that people didn't get what I was doing and tried to encourage me to go a different way. And then the outcome, you know, when I was interning for the Steve Harvey Morning Show, when it was just in LA back in the day, and I'm talking my sophomore year of college, and I was supposed to be there for like 60 days or something. It ended up being there 2.5 years. And everybody would be like, why are you there? What are you going to do with that? What are you supposed to get out of that? It didn't even fit the criteria that I needed for a business internship. So I still had to go get another internship. You know, it was like so much stuff and it didn't make sense. But when I look at where my life took me 10 years later, it was a relationship that, you know, that was created there that helped, you know, first of all, I saw so many things behind the scenes. So when it was time for me to step into it, I already knew the language. I already knew the lingo. I already knew the terminology, right? And so a lot of times, no, it doesn't make sense. But that's where it's like, you know what, God, I'm going to trust you and ride this out. Like, I'm going to sign up and just, I think you told me the other day about a season that I'm in right now. You said, see it as an adventure. You can see it as this one thing, or you can see it as an adventure. And I think that really resonated with me because that's what I've done in so many different little pockets of my life, is seeing things as an adventure. No, I don't know how this is going to pan out, but I surrender because
I have to raise my hands. That's good, girl. I got goosebumps because I must have said that to you in a moment because I forgot it. Because as you're talking to me, I feel like this is all like, whoo, this is good.
I know, right? But we got to surrender. And you know this, you know, I did a podcast episode about this, but we talked about it before the episode. I've learned that I can't be selective with my surrender. I can't, when I'm broke, I can't be like, okay, God, I surrender my finances. And then when I'm back on, I'm not worried about that. You know, if I'm having challenges in my health, like, Lord, I surrender my body to you. But when you were popping, you wasn't paying attention to what you were eating and how you were treating yourself and how you were protecting the vessel. Like, no, like if we say that we surrender, it's in all things. If we say we trust him, it's trust him.
In all things.
in all thy ways and lean not on our own understanding, right? Like we have to commit to, I don't get it. I don't understand it, but I believe that in everything that I feel in my spirit, in my gut, in that internal GPS, that it's a God moment, that if I move, that he'll meet me there. And either he gonna meet me there to encourage and push me to keep going, or he gonna meet me there and say, hold up, learn the lesson and turn. But either way, that he's never gonna leave me.
Yeah.
He's just with me the whole time. And even when it's hard, he'll give me the grace and the strength to pull through, you know?
That was going to be my next question. I was saying, at this point, you've had such great practice with hearing his voice and knowing when you hear it that that's him. That's the whole identification piece. So some people just miss it on the identification side. But then how easy, now that you have had practice, how easy is it now to follow moving forward? Do you feel confident that you can just do it and trust is no longer a factor? Or do you feel like it gets harder as you go along?
I think that it's kind of up and down. I don't think that it's very linear, you know, at all. Like, okay, you passed this one, so now on to the next and on to the next. I feel myself teetering between all kinds of different extremes. And that's where the being selective with surrendering comes in. Because some things, because I've seen, you know, the outcome and what can happen on the other side, it's easy for me to say, I know God's got it. And then in other areas where it's a new experience for me, or, you know, some things, no matter how many times you've heard it happen for people out there, until it affects you or your family,
right?
It doesn't resonate the same. It doesn't mean the same. And so it gives you another level of trust that you get to build and dig. And I don't think that anyone is ever a master at this. I think if you are, then you're not growing.
Right.
And then you start to think that you're so big and bold and bad that you don't even need God. So I think that there's always going to be different opportunities. We've talked about this. We know that spiritual warfare is real. And sometimes it is hard to know whether it's God or not, because we know the enemy is the master of deception and delusion, and will have you doubting.
Almost right.
Yeah, he got you with that real good and almost good, and now you're confused. You're like, well, dang, well, was it God or was it not? Right? And so I think that that's something that we're always battling, but that's why we stay in prayer. Like, that's why we are committed to sacred time, quiet time, whatever you call it, prayer, meditation, doing devotionals, reading your word, you know, meeting with the body, having, you know, friends that are also believers that we can. That's why we have to stay covered, because the minute we think we got it,
right,
and that it's not a problem. I mean, for me, in every area where I was feeling way too good about myself, those are the areas that have been most compromised, whether that be marriage, parenthood, financially, health-wise. Every time I'm like, oh, I'm in a rhythm, I got it, and then I kind of take my eyes off of that. But that's the spiritual warfare. I mean, that's why we have to keep the full armor on, right? And like always be on guard, because the minute we take a breath or take a nap, he's coming. We know that he's coming, you know? And so I don't think I'll ever have it sewn up so tight. And I don't even, you know, want to act like. That's why I always tell my audience, we're growing together. I don't say I've mastered any of these things. I've done better than average in several areas. And then there's several areas where I am mediocre at best, and I'm a work in progress and working on them every day with his strength.
Yeah, I feel the same thing. I feel like you never arrive. It's kind of like a moving target. It's as soon as you kind of come full circle, then he takes you on another bout of it, you know? And one of the things that I think has become so blatantly clear as I learned to trust is, and we're praying for that reaction time, is that delayed obedience is still disobedience.
Ooh.
And in that, it's just, you've got to be able to hear, know, and move. Hear, know, move. Keep going. Hear, know, move. And that's where I feel like the Holy Spirit, And I hate to sound like spirit, like, ooh, it's not a ghost. It's that voice.
It's that voice.
He promised that he would leave you a comforter, someone who would lead you and guide you into all truth. And so that hear, know, follow, hear, know, move, hear, know, move. He's directing your path. And that reaction time is so important, because I never want to be disobedient to God, because you miss out on your opportunities, you miss out on your blessing. He could also be guiding you away from danger just because you didn't listen. You know what I mean? You delayed and you missed the check. But you delayed and you missed an opportunity, you know?
That goes back to what I mean, I hate to keep going back there, but that being selective, because in certain areas we get the pebble and we move. And then when it comes to a different area of our life, we got to get the brick and the boulder and the mountain tossed on us before we listen. And I know that I have been guilty of that for sure, because in business, not so much when it comes to working with other people, but when it comes to, like, God gave me the vision for redefining wealth, and I spared no expense and was like post haste, like got to it. Like I literally got to it because I felt it so strongly. I didn't need a million different things. Although my site did get hacked. So I think I got the pebble and a rock. Like the rock was the site getting hacked. And I was like, okay, enough is enough. Let me just move, right? But there are different things where I always would say that I'm spirit led. So there are several things that moves that I've made that have been very much, again, not logical, based on what is going on at the time or in my life or whatever. But I felt so strongly that the spirit said, do it. So I did it. And I got to see the blessing of that. Maybe not immediately, but when I look back over my life, it's like, woo, yeah, had I not listened in 2007, then this would not be possible in 2018, which is true. But then I also see, and again, it's that big lesson you learn, different times where instead of leaning into trusting, surrendering, and knowing that God could help me get these things done with grace and ease, I thought about something that was dropped in my spirit, and I thought about it being in my own strength, which at the time I felt like I had none. And I was like, I don't have the infrastructure to handle that. I don't have the capacity to handle that. Like I don't have it. My whole conversation was about what I could do in my own strength.
Wow.
And then, words are powerful. What we verbalize, we magnify, right? And so as I started to speak that out of my mouth, the other thing is our mind is always creating a way to make us right. And so I started to speak it out my mouth, and then I start seeing a million different reasons that corroborated this story that I had made up. And then I dropped it, something that God told me to do in my business. I totally dropped it. And I was like, I'll get back to it. And then you fast forward several months later, and someone that I know did something very similar to the idea that was given to me. And I'm telling you, I was like a weeks away from just hitting launch and just doing it, and knowing that it didn't have to be perfect. I could figure it out in the process because I have a great audience who would have shown me so much grace, even if something messed up, right? But that's the whole battle for perfection and all that stuff we go through. And then I see this person that's doing it, and I'm so proud of them. I'm happy for them genuinely. And they've been wildly successful with it. And so I'm glad today that I have that example of what happens when I don't move and when I make it about my strength and forget. I think our devotional today said something about that.
You see me reaching. You see me reaching right now?
Yeah.
Here's the second piece of confirmation. You keep talking.
Yeah.
This one
so
right
it's
here is the same thing.
It's the same thing. It's like, but now the good thing is, because I believe I think that we all need something to reference back to. It's easy to listen to my story. It's easy to listen to Alexis's story. But until you feel the pain or the real disgust or, frustration with something, Now, when I feel myself hesitating, I get a chance to lean in and say, oh, you're going to do that again? What you about to do? If God told you to do it,
right?
You have the resources. If you don't have the resources, you know someone with the resources. If you don't have the connections, you'll find someone with the connections. But are you going to make this about your strength again? Because remember what happened last time? That you wanted to make it all about you instead of resting in the comfort of knowing that if he gave you this assignment, the provision is there. Everything that you need is there. He ain't asking you to build the pathway. He said, get on the path. Just be on it. He didn't say, go lay it out first. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
if y'all not listening, listen.
Yeah.
That's it. Here's the thing. There are two laws at work, or there's one law. It's a universal law. It's just like gravity. You step off the edge of the building, you're going down. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care who you think you are. You're going down if you step off the side of a building. In that same way, there's a law that whatever you speak will manifest itself, right? Yeah. The word says faith comes by hearing. Hearing what? The word of God. But that same law, fear comes by hearing too. Hearing the wrong stuff and letting it magnetize and manifest in your life. So you got to be really mindful about who your circle is. And you got to get with some people, join hands, link arms with people who are walking through similar things that you're walking through. So if you know that you're starting to hear or feel something, you need to link up with someone else who is going through a similar journey. So for example, she's sharing her story, Patrice is sharing her story with you, but what you don't know is that part of her sharing her story with me gave me 2 years, 3 years ago, when we were sitting at my table at Christmas Eve 2015, and you were just saying, hey, I just came back on a God move, and we just started talking. We talked for like 2.5 hours, nonstop. And I was telling you, I was like, I'm starting to feel something strong. Something's going on in the inside. I'm not sure what it is. I'm thinking I'm hearing, this is my first interaction in a long time with hearing the voice of God. And I'm like, but see, that faith comes by hearing. Coming by hearing someone else who's done it, hearing someone else who's willing to trust God, hearing someone else who's willing to look foolish for the sake of living a purpose-driven life.
Yeah.
For pursuing happiness and fulfillment in a different way other than what finances can give you right there in the moment. Because now, funny enough, you were talking about that time in your life, that season in your life where you were working at a job that doesn't necessarily pay you anything, but you found out you had other opportunities. Now I'm sitting in that seat, you know? And although, you know, I'm on staff at this place, but because it's nonprofit, it's not exactly what I thought I'd be doing. I didn't think I'd move from the classroom and do, but God was orchestrating every step. And in this position, he's prepping me and training me and giving me the lingo and helping me to be able to understand the inner workings of future position, because we're marked, hey, right? He prepares you in secret for what he's getting ready to position you for in public. And so I just think it's awesome. It's awesome. If you guys haven't already written 1,000 notes, listen, I'm here writing notes like crazy. Even though she's talking, I probably heard some of this stuff before, but I'm still writing notes because it's triggering so much. I have a few more questions, but these were fast thoughts. I wanted to know, what's your favorite scripture?
Proverbs 17:16. What good is money in the hands of a fool if they have no desire to seek wisdom?
Good. Yes. Most valuable lesson learned.
Ooh, so many. Most valuable lesson learned. I would say, most valuable. That there's always someone watching you who has the power to bless you. And, you know, that makes me very mindful of who I am on and offline. It's not that I have like a online persona that's different than what people see offline. It's just like be your best self. Like, you know, treat everyone with respect. Talk to everybody, whether they're the CEO or the janitor, you know, like take care of business. come on time, do like, just show up, look good, smell good, you know, because there's always someone watching who has the power to bless you. And so many of the opportunities that I've received didn't come from chasing anything. They've literally been attracted.
Good, good. Okay. Best piece of advice.
Ooh, best piece of advice. I'm like struggling because I have like one thing I want to say, but I think the best piece of advice based on, in particular, based on our conversation today, would be to give yourself permission to trust what you hear. Mm. Like, give yourself permission to trust what you hear. Because a lot of times I think we fight, you know, we fight what we know to be true. We fight what we heard. We fight the very path that God has laid out for us, but then we want to pray about other pieces of it because we think that we have the answer, and it's not based on how we want it to go. You know, we have to surrender and not try to manipulate or force a certain outcome. Okay. And I think we're so smart nowadays that everything has to be so logical, and it has to be a very comprehensive, thought out. And sometimes the best blessings and the best that God has for you is not that freaking logical. Like, that's where the trust comes in. That's where the faith comes in. And so give yourself permission to really embrace that level of faith, like to really embrace that level of trust. And it's not easy to do, but it is far better. I think it's necessary if we're going to get all that God has for us. Yeah. But you have to make a decision, I think, to give yourself permission to live that way, because people are going to question you, and there's going to be very well-meaning people who will tell you stuff like, that don't make no sense. And what are you doing and why? And, you know, I've learned to just tell people, I trust God. Yeah. That's one line that'll shut people down every time. Why are you doing that? I trust God. Good. 3 words. I trust God. And like you said, faith comes by hearing, right? If you keep hearing yourself say that, whew, that's powerful, because then you really do. And I've had seasons where I've leaned on it a lot. As a matter of fact, just saying it right now, I'm like, let me go on back to that.
The other day, I had a day where I had to meditate on be anxious for nothing. Be anxious for nothing.
Oh, that's one of mine.
I was driving and feeling overwhelmed, feeling stressed, trying to get 1,000 things done and only have 2 hands. And I just started saying that thing out loud so I could hear myself say it. Yes. So that I could understand, like, the word is life. It is like food. When you are malnourished and you feel like you're about to faint, you just have to find that word and say it. And it's incredible how it works. So you should try it. If you have never done it, talk to yourself out loud, especially in the car. It's good. How do you seek God first?
How do I seek God first? Mm-hmm. Usually through just being still and being quiet. I don't I feel like, because I feel like God is kind of always with me, I don't really have the radio on much or TV on or anything, so that in whatever I'm doing, I can just talk to him. Good. You know, like, before anything, I can just talk to him. Before I get on an interview, I just talk to him. Before I start working on a project, I just talk to him, and I talk throughout it. And so for me, just being in constant communication and conversation is how I seek him first. Like, before I call you, I do talk to him. And then sometimes he'll say, call Alexis.
Coffee or tea?
Oh, it's usually tea, but for some reason, for the last few weeks, I've been on a little coffee kick. Y'all pray for me, but not like every day, like maybe twice a week. I'm not a big This is what I do all day. This is my third one.
Good. That's a habit. I'm trying to, but see what happens. I drink the coffee and then I'm like, oh, I'm not thirsty anymore. But
no, you got to get a gallon of water a day, even if you drink other stuff. So I don't like to fill my belly with other liquids.
A lot.
No.
But we got to do it. We got to take care of ourselves. This is the temple. We got to take care of ourselves. Yeah. So last question. Best day ever. What's the best day ever?
Like, what is literally a best day I've had? Yeah, or like, what does a best day like look like?
Actually, let's do the best day you've ever had, and let's do what would it look like?
Oh, okay. The best day I've ever had. Ooh. Geez, that's actually kind of hard because you're like torn. It's like wedding day.
Yeah.
I have my kids,
Right.
No, I think the best day ever, actually, was the day that I was on that bathroom floor and I was bawling and crying. Literally, that was the first real deal. And I had lost a child, as you know, a year before, which was, I thought, the most devastating. And at that time it was. But then feeling hopeless, I didn't feel hopeless then. So being on the bathroom floor a year later, a little over a year later, and being at a place where I didn't have money, I didn't have friends in New Orleans, I didn't have family, I didn't have anything when I was there during that season. And then finding Proverbs 17:16, and in a split second, having a sense of hope and peace. Like, I don't know how to really, but that was the day that I found my purpose, like this season of purpose. And it shifted a bit. But I think the day that God met me where I was and restored my hope that I was not a failure because, I had gone through financial loss, and that I was not a stupid woman, or all of these stories that when you're going through something, you beat yourself up about all the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. So in that moment, I think that was the greatest day of my life, was God giving me a glimpse into life's coming attractions. Like giving me that, like, no, you can get up from here and be better than you've ever been. And I held on to that, and it's totally changed my life and restored so many different things in my life. So I think that's the best day of my life. And then what does the best day ever look like for me right now? It looks very similar to a day like today, which I'm very thankful that I get to do this 3-4 times a week, which is, I woke up, I went for a run, and I came back and I did prayer and meditation and devotionals and read my word for an hour. And then I get into my day, and the fact that I get to do this, like, this is a part of my work day. I'm talking about how good God has been, and how, and the lessons that I've learned. And before this, I did a couple interviews, and I got to talk about my story. But in those settings, I got to share how good God has been in a secular platform and still make it cool and acceptable, because it's my truth and it is what it is. And I think, like, being here and getting to do this in my space, in my home office, and I'm like, man, I'm grateful. Like, this is a great day. I could say laying out on the beach and all that stuff, and those things are cool. I enjoy them. I enjoy spa days. But the time that I get to do something where I know is not just for me laying out on the beach is for me, and then probably my husband and daughter, because it makes me be a little bit nicer to them, especially when they cut up. But me doing this type of stuff, it'll reach people who will never meet me, who I'll never know, and they may not hear it today in the day that it's, going down. They may experience it a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. It'll always be new to somebody. And the fact that something that I say could be a blessing to someone years later who would never know of me unless I had these types of opportunities with different people all over the world, like, that's huge. Yeah. That's a blessing.
It doesn't get any better. And I think it is God's signature to always bring you full circle, to show someone or to share that story with someone who, like you said, may have not, any other case, heard your story.
Mm-hmm.
But in my case, I have experienced small sense of satisfaction in that way. When I left, people were thinking that I was crazy and like, oh, she's, because I trusted God and I decided to follow. Only for them, the same people who thought I was kind of like, she's a little bit, have come full circle and called me almost a year to the day and said, I decided to do something very similar. I feel that nudge. I feel that sense, that urge. They can't describe it because they don't have the language to articulate it.
Yeah.
But they said, I decided to do the same thing. And you know why? You inspired me. And I'm looking like, what? I inspired you to do? But that's how he works. He webs us and weaves us together as this intricate fabric, this cloth, this quilt of experiences that we share, and we grow from one another, and we are built up by one another, and our faith is built based on hearing other people's stories. And I think that today I have been so privileged, and I'm so grateful, number one, for the ways in which God has threaded the two of us together, Patrice. Without welling up, because I'm not going to cry, I appreciate you immensely for the ways in which you've inspired me throughout the years. I remember you sitting on my sofa probably 7-8 years ago and said, I'm going to write a book. And when you said that, I was like, I don't know what she's going to write about, but okay. And then she started to kind of tell me, and I just appreciate you sitting there, sharing your vision, and then being a woman of your word, being consistent in your efforts and your work throughout the years, no matter what, and making that stuff come to pass. And then now we're almost at book number 4 or 5? 4. Listen, I've lost track. And I've just watched you from a distance, and I've listened, and I've been inspired, and my faith has been built, and I've been encouraged. And now that we have the pleasure of being each other's prayer partners, and mothers, joint, elbows, and praying for these children and praying for our husbands. It's just him taking us to higher heights. And I'm so grateful to have you on today. It's been nothing but a pleasure. And so thank you so much for all of you guys who are out there watching. Please make sure that you continue to follow us over at Facebook at Campaign P31. You can also follow us on Instagram at campaign.p31_. And please also go and visit Redefining Wealth, patricewashington.com. Go ahead and pick up her last book, which I believe is behind me, Real Money Answers. There she is in blue. She looks fabulous in blue.
Always.
And so make sure you get this. This will change your life and help you to live life chasing purpose, not money. All right, you guys, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Signing off.